So welcome to session 3 of the 201 Coaches Training for personal transformation coaches. I hope that your journey so far has been rewarding, challenging. I hope it's giving life to you. Hope you've had integrity around the doing of the homework for each one of the sessions. And I'm glad to be able today to do the session that we're calling Assessing Yourself, or in subtitles, in parenthesis, we call it the integrity conversation. Integrity is at the heart of the Faithwalking journey. The conversation that you heard at the 101 retreat out at the McCombs house, or wherever it was you did that retreat. The integrity conversation is the second conversation that we do in that weekend, and just over and over again we get feedback from people saying that it is by far the most impactful conversation that we have. And so I'm beginning this conversation with you today with this really deep conviction that if the coaching process is at the core of the success of our venture, then your and my growing integrity as coaches is at the core of the core of the core. Now I want you to listen to me very carefully. For almost every one of you who are training to be a coach, you are new to this process, and you are going to actually be assigned to coach someone before you feel fully competent and before you have full integrity. We recognize that. If we waited until a coach had full integrity, none of us would be coaching. That's not the point. But the point is that the integrity conversation actually becomes a core value that really drives who we are. There is nothing wrong with being out of integrity. Where something becomes wrong, if you want to use that language, is when I recognize that I'm out of integrity, when there is an integrity gap, and I just accept that that's so. You know you're taking the integrity conversation seriously when the moment you recognize there's an integrity gap, or what we would call a breakdown, that you get in action to clean up that mess. And so that becomes a way of life for coaches. And as that becomes a way of life for you, it becomes the most powerful thing that you have available to you as a coach. I don't know how to say it any more clearly. The coaching process empowers my own ongoing journey of personal transformation, because when I'm coaching you and I'm holding up a mirror to you, if I take the integrity conversation seriously, I can't hold that mirror up without also looking at myself and saying, where am I with that? What's going on in my life with that? And frequently, your conversation with me as a coach will trigger, the Holy Spirit will use that to trigger something in me to say, here's a place where you're out of integrity, where there's been a breakdown and you haven't gotten into action. And when that happens, getting into action. That's at the core of the core of the core. And so, today part of what I want to do is to remind you of the integrity conversation, and one of your homework assignments in this video session is for you to give the integrity talk to 3 people this week. You can give it to anybody you want to. You can give it to the lady at the grocery store checkout counter if you want to. You can give it to your spouse. You can give it to your parents or your children. You can give it to your coworkers. You can give it to your next door neighbor. The assignment is to give this presentation to 3 people. What we're trying to do is we're really trying to get you to internalize this, because we believe it's so important. Now, I'm not going to do the whole 1-hour presentation that we do at the retreat. You have that in your 101 notebook, and I encourage you, it's not required, but I encourage you to go back and read that presentation again after you hear my presentation. What that will do for you is you'll recognize that that's a big, long presentation, and I've put some things in and taken some things out and translated it into my own words to make the presentation today. And what I hope that does is I hope it gives you freedom to then to be able to make the conversation your own as well. Okay, so here's the abbreviated version of the integrity conversation. If you want to take notes, you can do that. Whatever will help you to really be prepared to make this presentation to 3 other people. It goes like this. We believe that the first thing that we know about God is that He's a creator. And out of the chaos of the earth, He brooded over all that chaos, and He created earth and light and land and animals and water. He spoke a word, and He created. And the first thing that we know about ourselves from the Scripture is that we're created in God's image. And so if He's Creator, then it means somehow, in some way that we can't fully understand, that we're most fully human and fully alive when we create. And in the same way that God created with His Word, we create with our Word. Now, sometimes God created, He said light, and light just, like magic appeared. Sometimes He gave His Word, and it took generations for that Word to be fulfilled. When He promised Abraham the destiny that he had, it took generations for that to be fulfilled, but He gave His Word to that, and He fulfilled on it. Our experience is much more like that, where we give our Word to the recreation of some part of our life, to the recreation of our family, to the recreation of our neighborhood, our public school, our workplace. So in some one of those places there are breakdowns. Those places, home, family, neighborhood, workplace, public school, those places aren't working the way that God designed them to work. And so out of our calling as His children, created in His image, we give our word to the recreation of those where they're restored to full functionality. And so the first definition that we use of integrity is the definition of workability. Those systems and structures, families, schools, neighborhoods, workplaces, those systems and structures have a design that God gave. But because sinful people and a fallen world is at work there, one of the byproducts is that it deteriorates over time. And so what we do is we come and we give our word. We come and give our word that these places are going to be restored to full workability. Well, how do we do that? I mean, we can't snap our fingers and magically make light appear. And so what we do is we give our word, and then we keep our word. And so we say, this is going to happen. We say, we're going to do this. We're going to create this. And we begin working by giving our word to making that happen. What we all know is that we give our word to things that are really challenging and large, and breakdowns occur. I don't always keep my word. When I can't keep my word, then what I do is I honor my word. And here's how I honor my word. I acknowledge that I haven't kept my word, and I go to the people that were impacted by that, and I ask them to forgive me. I ask them to forgive me by first getting present to the language we use is the mess, the chaos that our not keeping our word created. And we really get present to that. We allow the other person to tell us what the impact was. And we don't deflect it, we don't get defensive about it, we actually let it in. And as we let it in, then we're actually able to fully and freely ask for forgiveness and receive that forgiveness. And then once forgiveness has been given and received, we re-promise. And we re-promise, and then we go about attempting to keep our word. And we'll be able to keep our word some, and then we'll have some breakdowns. And then we repeat the process of honoring our word. And over time, two things happen. One is because we persistently work over a long period of time, things begin to change. And because when we don't do what we said we'll do, when we said we'll do it in the way that it was meant to be done, that's our second definition of integrity. When that happens and we get present to the impact, then God uses that to grow us up. He uses that to mature us, to conform us to the image of Jesus. And what that does is it increases our capacity to keep our word. This is not a short-term process. It's a long-term process. Sometimes it's a generational process. Mission Houston has been involved for several years now where we've given our word to the transformation of the public schools. And we've made a ton of progress, and we have a ton of progress yet to make. We have a whole lot more capacity today than we did 4 years ago or 5 years ago. But we don't have near the capacity yet that we need. God is in the process of bringing other people into that journey and enlarging the tent of people who are committed to that promise. And there is just this ongoing process that we have of honoring our word, of giving our word, of keeping our word. When we don't keep our word, of honoring our word, cleaning that mess up, re-promising and starting over, and persisting in that over a long period of time. It is our deep conviction that when we will become people of integrity, where we actually commit ourselves to the full workability of the systems and structures in our life, in our world, families, neighborhoods, workplaces, schools, places where congregations, anywhere where we are together with other people. And then if we'll give our word to the transformation of those places, doing what we say we'll do, when we say we'll do it, and the way that it was meant to be done, keeping our word. When we don't keep our word, honoring our word by cleaning up our mess, getting present to the impact, asking, receiving forgiveness, repromising. God actually uses that to transform people, to transform families, to transform communities. Now, that's the presentation that I want you to make. You get to make that in your own words. You get to make. You may want to use the Mission Houston Public Schools illustration, or you may have an illustration out of your own life that you want to use. But your first assignment this week is to make that presentation 3 times. Now here's your second assignment. Your second assignment is to go to the Faithwalking 201 notebook, and what I want you to do when you get that notebook is to go to page 3 in the notebook. I'm looking at it here on my computer screen right now, and I'm just going to read a small portion of what's at the bottom of that page. It talks about 201 having 2 overall course objectives. The first one is to provide participants with a set of tools that will fuel their ongoing personal transformation journey. And so as a coach, you're trying to provide them with a set of tools. And the second thing is to introduce a set of skills that are essential to establishing and providing servant leadership for an effective missional community. Now listen to this list, and as you listen to it, I want you to assess yourself. In other words, how well do you do currently? We're assuming that as you start the coaching process that there is an integrity gap around every one of these things. Is it this big? Is it this big? Is it this big? It doesn't matter how big it is. There's no shame in how big it is. There's no guilt. There's no judgment. What coaches do, what effective coaches do, is they tell the truth about those integrity gaps so that they can begin to take responsibility for closing that gap. All right, so just listen to this and assess yourself. One of the tools or skill sets is utilizing a coach. Everybody in 201 gets a coach, and you can use a coach well, or you can not use a coach well. You can listen to feedback, you can not listen to feedback. You can seek out coaching when you get stuck or stopped, or you can hide and pretend when you get stuck or stopped. Utilizing a coach is one. Casting vision is a skill set where you actually use your words to paint a picture of what you're giving your word to and of what the future would look like when that word was honored over a long enough period of time that it came to pass. The third is engaging in transformational conversations. Transformational conversations are conversations that you have with people where you are clear, authentic, and passionate, and you be in that conversation in a way that the person you're talking to is moved by that, they're inspired by that. It stirs something in them about wanting to be connected to what God would be doing in their life in the same way that you're sharing what God is doing in your life. The fourth one is confronting one's autopilot, especially the defensive routines. Do you know your autopilot? Can you describe it? Can you see it really clearly? If somebody said, what are your defensive routines? How clearly could you describe those? In the early stages of 201, for most of us, that's pretty unclear. Autopilot is a really hard thing to see. We just think it's the way we are. But over time, the capacity to see autopilot and the capacity to see defensive routines gives us an enormous amount of access to actually being able to get unstopped and to honor our word, or to keep our word. The next one is seeing anxiety and recognizing the impact of chronic anxiety. You didn't get any of that in the 101 retreat, but you got a lot of that in 201, where we talked about 4 different ways of responding to anxiety: overfunction or underfunction, conflict, distancing, blaming or projecting. Those were 4 ways that we talked about. There's a skill set around being able to see when anxiety is in a group of people, and being able to recognize when it's present, what people do, because then you have the capacity to intervene in a way that you wouldn't be able to do if you were simply caught in that anxiety. The next one is learning to be differentiated within a relational system. So you see all that anxiety, and what we teach people to do, what we coach people to do, is when they're in a system that gets anxious, rather than being sucked into that anxiety, to calmly begin to ask themselves, so what's the right thing here? What do I believe? What am I convinced of? How do I want to be in the face of this anxiety, and practice being that way? That's a learned process. You learn to be differentiated. How much progress have you made on that journey? And then clarifying your core convictions and your guiding principles. I just described that. I'm in a place of anxiety. I get anxious. I calm myself and say, what is it that I believe? Well, if I've clarified my core values, my core convictions, my guiding principles, they're going to be a lot more readily accessible to me. How clear are your core values? How clear are your guiding principles? I've written mine down. They're on my Facebook page. I've spent a lot of time and energy working on that. It's not a one-day exercise. It's a lifelong journey, but you get started and you keep pressing into that. The next one is using dialogue, as distinguished from discussion, as a tool for discernment. How do you discern the will of God in a missional community? By fostering dialogue among a group of people. And that's a different way of having conversation than discussion is. Discussion comes from the same root word that percussion and concussion come from. And when you put those three words together, discussion is like beating up on someone. It's like beating them down, saying that my way is right and your way is wrong, and I want to persuade you or convince you. Dialogue is a way of listening that says every person in the room speaks some part of the truth, and if we could all see what everybody sees, we're going to see a larger whole. But there's a skill set to that has to be practiced. How well do you do that? And then the final one is providing and receiving accountability. In the coaches community, one of the things that we found the hardest things to do is for a coach to actually, when they see a breakdown in some coachee's life, is to hold up that mirror and say, I see a breakdown here that you're not talking about. Tell me what that means. That whole providing and receiving accountability. When somebody holds up a mirror to you, how do you do? Okay, so that's the list. Let me just go through it one more time real quickly. It begins on page 3, at the bottom of page 3. Utilizing a coach, casting vision, engaging in transformational conversations, confronting your autopilot and your defensive routines, seeing anxiety and recognizing the impact of chronic anxiety, learning to be differentiated within a relational system, clarifying your core convictions and guiding principles, utilizing dialogue as a tool for discernment, and providing and receiving accountability. Now, two things happen at this moment. One is that new coaches get glassy-eyed and they say, holy moly, I'm not very good at any of those things. How in the world could I be a coach? The answer to that is by making a commitment to being a person of integrity. Wherever you are is where you are. And if you will do the homework that we were asking you to do and take this on, shadow your coach, and then let your coach shadow you, you'll be surprised at how well equipped you already are. But even our very best head coaches still have integrity gaps. We were at a coach, once you complete the coaches training and begin to coach, you're going to discover that about 3 or 4 times a year we bring all the coaches together for training. And we were in a training meeting just in April of, this is 2011, we're recording these, in April of 2011, we were in a coaches meeting and we did a role play around transformational conversations. And one of our best coaches, when the meeting was over, when the role play was over, said, wow, I didn't even understand what transformation conversations were. And I say that to just say that this is a journey of closing integrity gaps over time. Now, here's what we're asking you to do. What we're asking you to do in your notebook, there is an assessment. It takes these 8 or 9 skill sets and tools that we're working with people on, and just on a scale of 1 to 10, we're asking you to actually mark on a page, this is where I would say I am with this skill set or with this tool. We're not doing that to shame you. We're not doing that to judge you, or you're the only one who's going to see that. But here's the point. The point is you are responsible for your growth. Your head coach is not going to this system, the workability, the integrity of this system only works if as a coach you take responsibility for yourself. And so you know what the skill sets that you're trying to teach people. If there's a gap for you, you take responsibility for that. And maybe you do that by going back and reading the 201 material again and praying through that. Maybe you do that by getting with another coach and saying, I'm not clear about this, or I'm struggling with this, or I need to make some progress with this. Tell me what you do with this in your life. Or maybe it means calling your head coach and saying, I need some coaching around this. But the point is, you're responsible for all of that. Your head coach has not got a checklist where he or she is going to follow you around, where they're going to call the people you're coaching and try to grade you on how you're doing. The workability of the Faithwalking system, the integrity of the design, is that the 201 coach has to take responsibility for his or her growing integrity. And that's the presentation for this week. And so you have two assignments. One is to give the integrity conversation in your own words, with all the clarity and conviction that you can give it to 3 people. And the other is to, in your notebook, to find what the title on the page is, the self-assessment, and around these 8 or 9 tools and skill sets that I've just discussed with you, you're going to just simply mark on a continuum where you are on that, and what you see as ways to get in action to begin closing gaps that exist. Thanks for taking the time to do this. Look forward to seeing you along the way.